Welcome to Game Film, where we dive deep into the minds of advisors and industry leaders. In each episode, we uncover the stories behind their victories and achievements, offering you invaluable insights and lessons to help you grow and succeed. So, sit back, relax, and let's roll the film.
Hello and welcome to Game Film. This is Dr. Jordan Hutchison, and I am here with Mark Gilbert, the founder and CEO of Zox AI. Mark, glad to have you here.
Awesome. Thanks, Jordan. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to our chat. The AI note-taking space is a really interesting place because, like you understand this because you live it every day. It's blown up, and there's so many advisors that are jumping in to this tool, and my advisors are loving it. And it's also a big thing that I feel like only a few years ago, people were like, "Oh, I would never record a conversation, or I would never do a virtual call with my clients, anything like that." And now with the events of like COVID and just time, like the speed of technology has totally changed, I think, the client experience in people's minds, advisor and client minds with it all. So I'm excited to jump in and discuss with you.
Awesome.
But the first question I always start with, just to give people some color of like who you are, is if you had a walkout song and you were going to speak, or a come out song, or a song that gets you excited, like in a positive mood, what would that song be?
It's a super good question. So I'll give you two. So if it's truly a walkout song, I'm a big Jay-Z person actually. So Empire State of Mind still just kind of gets me in this like positive flow. And I live in San Francisco, so that's a huge statement to make. And the second one I would say is I run a lot. And if I'm really at that low running, sometimes you get, or you're hitting a wall. This will probably age me a bit, but Thunderstruck is a huge pick me up if I'm on the ground, I'll say.
Well, it's one of those songs that it's a classic, and I don't think, all of those songs are so, I feel like there's no specific generation to have this, because AC/DC has a long list of them. It's like Metallica too, like all of those.
Totally.
At any point in time, those are safe space to get
they
you
are
going, so.
They are timeless. And even like now that I say that, I realize like I'm not young, but I think even it was like, when I was tiny, it was already out and well known at that point. So but no, those are my two. They seem to work every time.
That's good. No, and there's a lot of, actually my CIO is a big runner, and now it makes me think too, as you mentioned that, because whenever I'm not a hardcore runner, but I could do a couple miles, but the song sometimes, when those days when you're challenged, you're like, all right, I know I'll feel better, but I need something to get it going. I'm actually very curious now. I'm going to ask him what his is, because that is so true for me too, is I've got to get that song to get me going.
The workout and running playlist is definitely a window into people's souls that are sometimes.
That's why I asked the question.
Yeah, sometimes embarrassing, but good.
All right. Well, the first question I have is, how did you get into the world of financial services? Because you have an awesome background where, time in Microsoft, you've been the CTO of companies, now you founded this. So how did you fall into the financial services profession?
Yeah. So for me, I grew up and, been kind of a solid tech person. I love building things. I've loved that since I was small. I think it first started actually at Microsoft. So Microsoft, I worked on a lot of the platform technologies at enterprise. And one of the most interesting things for me with financial services is it's an area that, I think when you first think about it is all numbers. And then when you get into it is very relationship and frankly emotional based.
So true.
And I've just seen a ton of technologies that I think are super valuable or could be super valuable in that space. But because of the security, the compliance and everything else, like, I feel like the industry's been frankly a little hamstrung, right, from using some of these new things. And so just enabling that has really fired me up. And then I was at a company called Hearsay Systems for quite a while and helped build that out with some really amazing people. And that really cemented that. Like you could just go in and, it only worked with financial services and some insurance companies. And it's frankly really rewarding to be able to like take technologies that are quite new and put the right pieces in place that they need and really tailoring it for the scenario. And then, like, frankly, people light up, and we see that now with Zox too. Like, people light up using it, which is awesome. So it's super rewarding for me. And stayed there. And most of our team, I would say, probably is lined the same way.
Yeah, the Microsoft background, I feel like adds so much value into when you're building Zox now, because so many systems, I would say a large majority, live in the Microsoft ecosystem, and so understanding that as you're building a product, I feel has to be so foundational to to what you're building, because that's what a lot of us build different things on. And also, I have a guy on my team that I love working with dearly, because he has 12-15 years with Microsoft before coming on here.
Yeah.
And he just understands that there's so much even that like people are not utilizing.
Oh
We
yeah.
we built things in house because we're like, oh, Microsoft has that. You just gotta, tweak a little things here,
Adjust a setting,
check the security, like make sure the permissioning is right. This, all of that, but you can do that with Microsoft, and now we don't have to buy another vendor to do this. Like, I feel like there's so much value in that. But
I learned a ton there, and I think you can't really, like, frankly, grow up career-wise at Microsoft without understanding platforms. Like, everything is a platform there, and so it's just super good learning as you're building.
No, it's awesome. So obviously, I intimately know Zox. Our advisors love Zox very much, and I've got glowing feedback from actually one in the office today, and I was walking out, and he even mentioned to me, he goes, Jordan, having that follow-up email, one of my clients, at the end of the email, I always ask him, like, hey, did we cover everything that we discussed on the call? And he said that his client said, it is amazing how accurate that you got, I think, every detail we discussed today. And I was like, I mean, this is the advisor's name is Jim. And I was like, Jim, I can't, I don't even have it. I'm speechless, because that was the whole goal of us working with this company. So could you give the listeners a little overview of what Zox is?
Yeah, so Zox is, at a high level, a system that really helps you with client conversations. And that, that's listening, helping you prepare for meetings with clients, during the meeting, helping you focus on your clients, because we can frankly do a lot of the, like, what we call data capture, and making sure that we have all the information. And then coming out of that meeting, we help you with both the what we call the core three. So, like, do you have a note that you want to put in CRM? What data do you want in that note? What are the follow-ups that you need to do, or someone at the firm needs to do? And then the client email. And all of those are what we call, like, fully customizable. So you can literally, if you've written an email to clients in the past to follow up for meetings, you can load that into Zox, and it will both take the sections and kind of mimic your sections. It'll mimic how formal you are. It'll mimic how verbose or how concise you are, and things like that. And so that's really how we started. And when I say started, like, we launched, I think, 9 months ago, pretty much to the day today. So it hasn't been that long of a runway. The company's just under 3 years old. And, but what we're seeing with that is, now that we have that information, we're able to help advisors and teams more and more, really with all parts of, like, frankly, helping serve clients, right? So you can now ask the system questions. It'll look in your CRM system and all these notes and the data we have, and answer those questions, about the client. We just actually put out a beta of being able to help you reply to emails as well. So if clients send you emails, you can just pop it in, say, how would you reply to this? And it'll basically go get the data and tell you what's going on and go. And our goal ultimately, we believe that advisors really like working with clients, and frankly like the strategy as well of, like, what are the plans? What should this be? How do we want to deal with this? Plus, frankly, the emotional and psychological aspect. And so if we can take away all the data entry and those types of things, and let the advisor focus on the client, let the team focus on things that they find more valuable, which is often, like, marketing, following up personally with clients. Those things are much more exciting for them than typing. Not that CRM systems aren't exciting, but typing into CRM systems gets a little boring over time. So that's, at a high level, what we do.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, and I think that the ability to give them that time back and let them spend more time focused on the engagement. I mean, we learned from seeing that robo and, like advisors and robo investment platforms, it's a very much a big scale game, because a lot of them consolidated. I mean, there's only a few big players really left in the space, and everyone thought, like, oh, this is gonna squash all advisors' jobs and they're going to be done. And I think we've even more made apparent that their job is very valuable, but how can you leverage them with technology? And so I think that you're on a good path. And I love that when you mentioned that it's able to go back and forth, like bi-directional with it, it changes the game, because now I feel like there's so much gold in those conversations
Yeah.
that it helps even like with learning the pieces of it. Cause a lot of advisors, we might have caught one nugget in that conversation. Well, now we're able to catch two or three
Yeah.
or all of them, and we're able to lean in. So I'm excited to see what you guys are building, and we'll talk some more in a second about it. And one of the things that is so important is the integration piece of it, because
Yeah.
you mentioned that core three, which I love hearing that. How are you guys like seeing with your integrations? Like obviously you've got it with the different email providers and CRMs. What's on like the roadmap for like future on some of those? I think because that's that conversation. Integration can mean this, it could mean this.
Yeah. It's
So
it can get pretty
I think
broad.
advisors would love to hear what you guys are working on there.
Yeah, so I'll just start with like again, the like our North Star as we look at these things is really how do we save the advisors time and give them better insights into the clients? And that's really how we look at it. So I would say in the short term, like you've seen a number of updates probably recently for anyone tracking Zox, where not just CRM integrations, but what we call deep CRM integrations. So now we can do these two-way things. If you have email attached to your CRM system, we can look at that for a client. And really what we're doing is we're using that data to give better, like essentially like better emails, better answers, better insights,
Right.
all of those things. And so you'll see more of those. We've had a lot of those just come out. We have a lot that are just about to come out, which is great. And like all of these kind of deep two-way pieces. In addition to that, you're going to see direct email integration. So a lot of people don't attach email to CRM for a bunch of reasons, which makes sense. Email, like at a high level, what we see is these conversations are very dense in data. Like there's a lot of really good data in there. And there's also like, I'll say nuggets that you typically wouldn't see in a CRM system. And so what we want to do is be able to get that data into the CRM system, kind of like fill out the CRM system, fill out the client profiles. And I think email is another source, frankly, of very rich data, right? Because a lot of people have a lot in there. So the next phase for us after that is really like today, we can look over CRM profiles and update those. You're going to see that move to planning systems as well. And so, like as we look at, if, let's say you and I were talking and you were my advisor and I told you whatever, some updates, I had a salary change, pay change, maybe I'm getting a bonus or got a new car. What we'll be able to do is very quickly be able to look across the planning system and both update those. But in addition to that, the planning systems also have very interesting data for us. So if a client has a question, we're able to take that and answer it better. So you're going to see planning systems, you're going to see custodial systems as well pretty soon because they are somewhat the master data source, for most of these things. And then on the communication side, we just launched phones. So you can now like take any phone call and essentially like just have Zox join it. And you'll start to see more of the other virtual and phone systems as well there. So we always want to make it as easy as possible, to use Zox. But really on what we call the back office side, you're going to see the planning systems, you're going to see custodial systems. And then for some of the more, I would say medium-sized firms plus that have data systems, getting that data as well into things like data warehouses and data lakes. And we're starting to see some of our clients do that today because it's just frankly super valuable and interesting. And as you probably know, like a lot of firms are somewhat flying blind, you know what I mean, without going and talking to the advisor about what's going on. And so we're helping with that too.
It's so true. And I love the vision of like all that data, bringing it together. Because I think that in all of our minds, we think that we're doing that with our CRM. We think that we're like, oh, well, this is where we're putting everything in. And I don't think anyone in the industry would question this, but like having a well built out CRM is a lot of work. And I mean, it's a lot of time for your operations and staff teams to just keep things updated, make sure that connections. That's why I think it's funny that for other tech people that listen to this, when you said the CRM and email connecting, some people don't do that. That's such a like sensitive like subject because there's so many we use Salesforce FSC and everyone's Salesforce is different. And so what are you using for that email capture? What are you using for the calendar sync? All those things sound like just like, oh, well, can you just like flick a toggle and it's going to work? Absolutely not.
Yeah.
It's not.
No, not
And
at
it's
all.
such a
Yeah.
meaty product, like, to do that.
Yeah, no, it's challenging. And you don't, like there's a lot of things that seem obvious, but then all of a sudden, like, your babysitter mails you and you have a new contact in FSC that's your babysitter, right? And you're like, I don't need this. Like it's the devil's in the details there. But yeah, like our view, like the CRM systems are really good for like, I think the overall goal is the same, right? Like like in this industry, you need books and records. So it's that. They
Right.
also have turned into a system of integration for I would say like the vast majority of firms. So that's very helpful for us too. And so the plan is if we can get more and more data in there in a very simple way, not just meeting notes, but like updating the profiles, getting, like the family trees built out, the households built out, all of those things that, in theory you kind of think you should do, but like frankly, nobody has the time to sit there and like look
Right.
through all of that data every time you meet with someone and update it. But we can do that quite quickly for you. And so if we can make the CRM system both more up to date and frankly just more dense, right? Like where there's denser data, then there's all of these super cool scenarios that will come out of that I think are not even really on people's minds today. But whenever we see these like new technology waves come in, right, there are just all of these things that become possible. And so we always see like the first thing is, it like kind of replaces the analog, right? So people want to type up a note and put it in CRM, we'll type up the note. People want to type up an email, we'll type up the email. But once you start to get this rich data and, we're close to being able to do quite a lot in an accelerated way that would have been like honestly unheard of 4 or 5 years ago, which is really cool.
Yeah, I love it. I think that you make a strong point of a lot of firms, if they haven't invested in the data infrastructure for a data lake, um, their central point where they're connecting everything into is their CRM.
Yeah.
And so that is the place where all of that is feeding in. And, some of those, depending on if you're using Salesforce or Wealthbox or Redtail, whatever it is, sometimes it's just not fully what you were looking for, because obviously these companies are massive. They're trying to solve
Yeah.
for the mass. And so, yes, everything in Salesforce is pretty much customizable, but there's always limitations. I've always found that just working with advisors, they always have this like other doc or this other
Yeah.
document
Exactly.
like
Yeah.
that was like, well, here's all the stuff I need for them to open an account, and like the stuff that's very structured data. But like all the other stuff of like, hey, this is what we went over in the meetings, like, because there's not a lot of space, like how are you building that into notes or
Yeah.
in the invite, like what's all the other color? I know that some firms have used like mind maps, or they have just different documents. I feel like it's going to cut that out, where now they can actually like bring all that in,
Yeah.
because a lot of times, like if you're inheriting a book of business or you're taking on a new client, you can see the CRM and you're like, great, Suzanne and Jim are in their 60s. They've got, their occupation is this. Like, you're like, all right, well, this is the most awkward conversation ever, because like I know what you do, I know the name of
Yeah.
your kids and their jobs and where they live, but
I have no color
where,
on this. I know nothing
yeah,
about you.
I don't
Yeah.
know what
Yeah.
was talked about, like,
Yeah.
and like how are you able to query that information? That's why I feel like data is so foundational, like in our industry. Like I love that we're all moving on, and I feel like your vision is so on target, where how like RFG we're seeing it is there's just so much there that we've got to be able to, let's bring it all together so that you can use it. So I love that
Yeah.
how you're seeing the planning and the custodian is going to be like the next play for it.
Yeah, yeah, it's super interesting. I think one of the big shifts that we've seen like under the hood is, in the data space, kind of into this rise to, AI and everything. I would say 20 years ago, even 10 years ago, frankly, most people are using, and this is how CRM systems work, like very specific schemas, right? So you almost look at the business, you're like, okay, what data do we need on this person and everything else? Um, and about 10 years ago, even a little more than that now, you started to shift to these like almost schemaless or a lot looser structured data, and that's really what we see is valuable here, right? So like, if you and I are talking and let's say I bring up that I'm looking for a vacation home on a lake for the summer, and one of the reasons I like a certain lake is my brother has a house there, my brother-in-law has a cottage there or something. You're like, oh, that's important, I should write that down somewhere. But you're like, where the heck does that go, right? Like there's no spot in the CRM system to be like, where's Mark's brother-in-law? How, like but you're like, that's a nugget I really want. And that's why people end up with, as you mentioned, like, we see it all, like, OneNote files, shared drives with a bunch of stuff in them, like all these things, because what that really is kind of this like semi-structured data that continually evolves, right? So we see topics
Right.
and things come up now that even earlier in the year just weren't important and you wouldn't have really thought about it. But yeah, and so now with all of these things, you can both get the data and put structure around it without having to like kind of cement it in, like with that being able to still vary a little bit and deal with things.
Yeah,
And that's
you have a
important
little
just
bit
for,
more malleable, like
yeah, it's a
with
little
the
more
product.
flexibility and a little less like, you can answer this question with these three replies. That's all, right? And you're like, what about the fourth reply, right? Which is frankly how a lot of like older CRM systems are set up. Yeah, so
Yeah,
we can really help with those.
and I think that like CRMs, I'm probably more on the bearish side of how some CRMs are structured and like the use cases of them. Because if you think, and I'm going a little off script of like just like ideating here of it, but like I see so much of the way that we want to interact with things is more of a question. Like think about how right now we prompt everything for AI.
Yeah,
I know that the growth and everyone, a lot of people are looking at it as like in the form of an agent. So it's already
yeah,
doing some of those, or you're training it to do certain tasks. But I feel like we search for so much stuff in a CRM, whereas I feel like a lot of the stuff is going to become almost like Alexa and all of that kind of took a side cart, of everything we're doing with AI. But like, there's still a lot of good gold there in how we're prompting those conversations. And it's
yeah,
like, even one of the features on your product is like how it's listening for consent.
yeah,
And I think eventually you can ask it questions for things, or when you're just querying something in your system of like, hey, did we ever talk about vacation? Like, you can't do that in your CRM. Like, you might have some good searchability, you might have
yeah.
some like where you can get some keywords depending on how you've structured certain things. But and that's why those OneNotes, or anyone that's tried to search for an email in their email inbox, you search for one keyword and you're like, oh, I'll definitely find it, and then you get like 70 emails, you're like, that is exactly what I'm not looking for.
Yeah,
But
yeah, yeah. No, it's totally that. Like we see that a lot, right? Where like now, so we just actually did a pretty large update over the last 6 to 8 weeks of what we call the AI assistant, which is now kind of throughout our app. And underneath the way that works is there's actually quite a lot of these AI agents that are working. So like an agent to look at your email and analyze that to look for answers is actually different from an agent to look at, your CRM notes, which is different from conversations and all that. And similarly, an agent that would write an email is different from an agent that would come up, like give you analytics on things. But the nice thing with that now, and we're super excited about it. I think we're just starting to see, it's kind of like the iceberg, just the little peak coming out of the water of the capabilities. But now you are going to be able to go in and with the CRM, attached with that data, you can start to answer these questions that are very hard today to go answer, frankly, like exactly as you said. And we'll even start to have those give insights, right? So like if a state, let's say, is having their 529 custodian change, we'll be like, hey, do you know you have 12 clients, you know what I mean, in this state with the 529? Like you need to get a hold of them or remind them to update, right?
right.
Or hey, it's that time of year where people who need to make, tax prepayments need to go make it. And here are the, like 23 people in your book of business that are affected by that. And so these things just be, and they become very dynamic, right? So if there are
Right.
things that matter next year, which I'm sure will happen with the market, um, those don't need to happen. The system will evolve with that naturally versus having to get structured ahead of time.
And I feel like the AI note taking space as that term, I feel like you guys are a lot more than that. But I feel like that term has gotten a little bit of a bad rap because I read an article. I want to say it was God, it was, I don't think it was Forbes. It was some probably like tech blog or something I was reading, but it was an opinion article where people were saying like they were overused because they were joining all these meetings and no one was actually attending the meeting. It was just their AI note taker. And
Yeah,
it's like,
yeah, yeah,
is this going to be like Evernote and OneNote where like we saved all these articles, but we never went back and actually read them kind of thing?
yeah,
Are we
yeah.
actually going to ever go back and read that transcript? I think personally that financial services is maybe not unique, but is unique in the aspect of we love having that because we're using it not to not be in a meeting, but we're using it to just help quantify so much more. And so I feel like the fact that you guys have specialized in the financial services space is really powerful because it's doing so much more and it's not getting the negative rap for it because we're actually using it.
Yeah, no, I agree totally. Like you've seen like before starting Zox, I was at a larger company. Um, and in those cases where you have these staff meetings and you have all hands, like it makes sense. Hey, I showed up 5 minutes late. Can I get a summary? I think at some point you have to ask, like, if there's a 30-person meeting and it's all note takers, like, did you need the meeting in the first place?
Right.
But in financial services, right, like these discussions with clients are so valuable, right? They're just so valuable. And even on the, like on the B2B side, if people are talking, like if you have a chief investment officer and they're looking at different investments, like the data there is really valuable. Right. But because we're like, what we see is because we're focused on the industry and we have this structured data model, what you can then do is go in and start to query things, right? So you can say, which is like unheard of before, you could say like, how many of our clients are actually married and having relationship issues, which is like not always the most positive thing, but the fact that you could go in and actually answer that question from these is hugely powerful, right? And I think that a lot of that is making it queryable. So like even in the way, if you're at a large company, you could say like, how many of our meetings or how many hours did I spend in meetings last year on HR issues? Like that actually be pretty interesting data for some of those. But the more you focus on the scenario and the industry and the use cases, you just get a lot more deep, and you can pull out these insights that are so valuable. And yeah, I agree. Like I think the overall general meeting summarization is pretty different, frankly, from what we do. And you'll see that just kind of become everywhere, like that, like, Teams and Zoom and everyone will, like have those built in now, and they'll get better and better. But I think once we start to look at, what's the actual data and the structure that you want for the industry, and then also with these agents, like given that, how can we help people, right? Can we auto create, an account application with the pieces filled out for you, because we know from the CRM system and these conversations how to do that, right? And anybody who works, filling out, who has filled out an account application for frankly anything would like happily get rid of that work, right? They just, that's one of the most exciting things for us too, is like the work that we're really kind of accelerating and automating and helping with is frankly the work that people typically don't love doing, right? Like they don't love typing things in, they don't love filling out forms and docu-signing everything. It's not the fun part of the job.
And there's so much room for error. Like you mentioning, I have a friend of mine that sold he's a CTO, and he sold his company. He's in the UK to FNZ, and I was talking with him the other day about just like the opportunity, what you just mentioned, that I could be on a phone call with you, and that information, or phone call, meeting, whatever it is,
Yep.
answering basically the questions just as we're talking. You're filling out the application for us. Like if you approved, like, hey, yes, I want to move over, you've given those consent to it. I can't even the thought of that is so powerful, because, as us, we're an aggregator, and we've bringing on new firms, and the account opening process is like that front end of the advisor relationship is such a burden and such a pain. And so advisors would they'll give you their firstborn if you can help them with that, because it's just like, all right, I got to fill this out for compliance, and I get it. And I got to fill this out for, all these different suitability things. And we understand the importance, because of course we're handling people's money and what's most
Security and
important to them.
privacy is critical,
But it is time consuming and it's frustrating. So I love that that's how you're seeing it. I want to take a little bit of a right turn.
Sure.
And you have a really powerful background, and I always want people to learn from that, because you've worked for some great companies. You're now a founder of it and leading a great team. I've worked with your team, and I've enjoyed it very much. What would be like 2 or 3 like nuggets of insights that you've learned over your career of, being a CTO, you're now a CEO and founder, you've worked for all these great companies. What would be like 2 to 3 nuggets that you would pass on to other people in our industry?
That's a super good question. I would say in the industry, like in any industry, these are going to sound a little trite, but I can get more specific on it. One of the things you mentioned is, at the end of the day, people matter a ton. If you have the right people, you can frankly fix a lot of problems. And if you don't have the right people, it's really tough. And that, if I look at my career and kind of some of the biggest things we've accomplished, it's not, part of it is like, were you excited about the goal and everything else? But a lot of it is like, it's actually the people you're with, right? If the people are really good and they both support but challenge and push you, That's a huge thing. And I go back to like, if you look at, and we like, obviously I talk to startups all the time, and, I'm in San
Right.
Francisco, so we all get together and chat about AI and everything. And you can tell very quickly, like the teams that are just really good and kind of firing on all cylinders. So that's a big one. The other one is just focus and the goal. And I think for financial services, you can tell the firms and the people that are extremely client focused. And client focused isn't just like, hey, we should help out and do these things and make sure we're doing right by them, but truly like, we're there when they need us to be there, right? And we want to make sure that we're solving the problems they want, not just, like pushing the things that we want to do.
Right.
I would say focus across the board. And it sounds easy to say, but by definition, when you're focusing, that means you're ignoring other things. And that's probably the hardest part of leadership, is to just like let certain things go, knowing that, you've made a bet on what matters the most. Um,
I
yeah.
love those two, and I'm in full agreement. And they both sound, like you said, they might sound simplistic in the matter that like your people and then your focus, but it's so true. I mean, you've got to be so purposeful with hiring and the team that you're going to go to the trenches with, because there are going to be good days, there's going to be bad days.
Yeah.
You're going to have, you don't need egos. We need to work, and
That's it.
I'm going to mess up one day. You got to own the problem. Like, let's solve it together. We're here to fight together. I love that. And the focus one, my academic research is all around a thing of focus. So of being in the state of flow. So you're speaking my language with the importance of it, because it's really hard. And that's actually so purposeful to advisors, that they have all these things that they could be doing today, but then you get nothing done. It's kind of like you're the jack of all trades and master of none in some ways. Like you've got all this stuff, but you gotta be focused. You got to pick those three things that you're going to knock out. And you mentioned, I think, even a more important part, which is really hard. And I have a lot of great leaders that report to me, and I'm always talking to them about this, because this is hard. Something I even still have to fight with is you've got to be able to say no to the other things. That is like such a simple statement, but it is so hard when you're there and you're like, all right, I've got these 4 big things that I need to work on. Which one's not like important? And you're like, well, they all are.
Yeah.
It's like, well, you can't get all of them done. You got to get rid of one. So that's tough. We're coming to the end, and so I wanted to I always end with one question, and it's kind of a flip on like another advice one, but it's, what is the worst advice that you've ever received?
Oy, that's a good one. I've received a lot of bad advice. I would say the worst, like ignoring the bad advice, it was obviously bad advice.
Right.
So you just, like didn't even really give it a piece of your brain. I would say, this is going to sound a little odd, but, there is advice that I think a lot of people get, especially early in career, to do something they love. And like, I think that's helpful in the sense of like, if you really hate your job, you should probably go get another job. So I think the opposite is very true advice. But what I've noticed over time is a lot of people, especially early, take that as something that where they're actually just very happy and easygoing every day. And that, like, what I've seen is the largest accomplishments are hard just at the end of it. Like, they're hard, right? If you're building a
Right.
financial services company, if you're starting a business, it's hard. If you're
Right.
trying to launch, like software that's, used worldwide, it's hard. All of these things are hard. And so there's a lot of situations, which I think is one of the frankly harder things for anyone choosing where to spend their time, where, the day-to-day may actually be very challenging, and you have to get thoughtful on like, is it challenging because you're learning and doing the right things and challenging yourself, or is it challenging because you actually don't like the work, which is very different. But if I like helicoptered you into some of the most difficult situations, right? Whether that's building a product, building a company, any of these things in people's career, and then I fast forwarded it 6 months, and then in the moment, you're like, oh, this is really hard. Like, this is tough. People are arguing about stuff. People are, all of these things. Then you fast forward, often people will look back and say like, that was one of the most, impactful things that they had done, even though it was very challenging through it. So, we do get a lot of advice. We get a lot in tech too, where it's like, hey, you need to really enjoy what you're doing. And there's definitely a truth to that. Like, if you don't enjoy the area, if you don't kind of fundamentally enjoy the activity, it's a problem. But, hard things take a lot of effort and are hard. And, like there's a book, I forget, it's a very well-known VC called, Like I think it's literally called like the hard thing of hard things or something like that. But it's just all these
Yeah.
lessons from, it said Andreessen Horowitz, Ben Horowitz wrote it. It's just about all these like hard things they had to go through. And the reality is like they built an amazing thing. They built a number of amazing things. And you realize like the pieces to get there are not always, get up, have a cup of coffee, smile, and go for a walk. Like it's tough. So I would just, I think especially early in career, be very thoughtful about what you want to get done and not over anchor on like, is this easy or hard, or do I enjoy it? Like, is it kind of easy going, and really focus on the big picture. Long
I
answer,
love
sorry,
that.
but yeah.
No, that's a great story, and I love it, and that's like a great way to end for our conversation, because I'm a firm believer in that as well. I think that we all heard that advice. Oh, follow your passion, follow
Yeah.
what you enjoy, and it's like, but the person that did that, I don't think they did that, and so
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
love that advice, because I feel like yours is the upgraded, like updated version of what is really going to give you fulfillment and the sense of like identity, meaning in your job. Like if
Yeah.
you actually want that, that's the path that will give it to you. So I love it. So um, I appreciate you, Mark. I really do appreciate your time. I know you're a busy guy, so thank you for bringing your insights and telling us more about Zox. The last thing I'll say is, how can people find you and your company?
Yeah. So online, Zox, ZOCKS.io. We post updates there. We do everything there. There's an email newsletter. You can get all the product updates and everything as well. And then we are doing more and more on LinkedIn. So Zox is on LinkedIn, and then myself, just Mark Gilbert. See me there. And yeah, we post stuff all the time, and we're getting more and more active. We kind of frankly went into a bit of a shell or a cave, if you will, while we were building for a year and a half before launching. But as we launched earlier this year, we're finally having time to kind of get out, and you can see all these product updates. And frankly, we're super excited about what's coming. So both those spots are great spots to track us.
I think those are perfect. I appreciate the time, Mark. I really do.
Awesome. Thanks, Jordan.
Thank you for listening to the Game Film Podcast. Click the follow button to become notified when new episodes become available. Visit our website at www.rfgadvisory.com. Content here is for illustrative purposes and general information only. It's not legal, tax, or individualized financial advice, nor is it a recommendation to buy, sell, or hold any specific security or engage in any specific trading strategy. Information here may be provided in part by third-party sources. These sources are generally deemed to be reliable. However, neither our guests nor RFG Advisory guarantee the accuracy of third-party sources. The views expressed here are those of our guests. They do not necessarily represent those of RFG Advisory, its employees, or its clients. This commentary should not be regarded as a description of advisory services provided by RFG Advisory or performance returns of any client. The views reflected in the commentary are subject to change at any time without notice. Securities offered by registered representatives of private client services. Member FINRA SIPC. Advisory services offered by investment advisory representatives of RFG Advisory, LLC, RFG Advisory, or RFG, a registered investment advisor. Private client services and RFG Advisory are unaffiliated entities. Advisory services are only offered to clients or prospective clients where RFG Advisory and its representatives are properly licensed or exempt from licensure. No advisory services may be rendered by RFG Advisory unless a client agreement is in place. RFG Advisory is an SEC registered investment advisor. SEC registration does not constitute an endorsement of RFG by the Commission, nor does it indicate that RFG or any associated investment advisory representative has attained a particular level of skill or ability.